There has been much talk about wokeism from a comedian, John Cleese, while we're on it, and the question of it being fascism from Finklestein. This ideology is Marxist based and has a lot of hatred for this one, mainly against white straight men, but it also has some strange development over the years and had a history of it as well. So what is wokeism and why is it prevalent in today's society? So when it comes down to wokeism, if you don't know what wokeism is, it's pretty much the concept of, if you don't know what it's based off Marxism, Karl Marx who created which is what communism is based off, Marxism, and postmodernism philosophy, which is kind of how, you know, over time things have developed sort of around when things were kind of just post, like for example to do with like healthcare, and also being able to, you know, over time how things have developed just sort of kind of mid around the 20th century when things were starting to get modernised. At least that's how I interpret it, at least. And you can see this and it is really prevalent in media. So for example, there is like companies, for example, like Disney, I don't know if I'll get sued for saying this, but when it comes down to their content, like for example the race swapping of the characters, the making the male character more stupid and the woman more smarter, which, you know, obviously people would know that isn't really true. And it's just kind of a load of subversion of kind of like culture, society, making people who are white just this weird kind of ugly type of person. Like for example, you don't just see this in, you know, movies, but you also see this in video games. So for example, Horizon Zero Dawn also had this situation where they made the characters a little bit more ugly, like the white female protagonist of the character, I can't remember her name. And also in the new latest Spider-Man game, that would also work as well, because they have to do this now to do with their ESG scoring. So for example, if they don't get high enough scoring, I don't think they're either not allowed to release, or they either won't be able to get enough money or support. I can't remember which one's which, but pretty much they have to fill in the scoring system that they have, and they have to put like, you know, they have to put pride flags in or anything work, and that is the ideology that you see there. It's pretty much this Marxist ideology that is very hateful, not just towards whites, but also be able to put LGBT stuff in there as well. And you see all the pride flags and all these other things that are aspects within the media. Now, whether to say this is bad is kind of questionable. Like, for example, if you look at someone like John Cleese and his warrant wokeism, he talks about being a comedian who has been not just attacked, but, well, he actually has been attacked because I think the BBC off the iPlayer actually pulled Fawlty Towers. If you don't know what Fawlty Towers is, it's basically pretty much this guy who's a bit dysfunctional running a hotel, and there was a couple of scenes, or at least one episode, and I kind of even had a short series, but that was just a brief little explanation of how long the series lasted. And it was pretty much him doing like the Nazi walk, I think. What was it? I think it was going up and down with his legs, and they actually pulled that episode, and there was a few other episodes they pulled that I can't remember, and he kind of, you know, defending himself, and also said that it was just for comedy, you know, comedy, and, you know, obviously making racist jokes isn't necessarily, obviously, that people would see that bad, but you got to remember, a comedy at the end of the day is to make people laugh. It's not there to make any political statements, it's not there to, you know, target anyone, it's just to make people laugh, just making really offensive jokes. You know, you can see this with other comedians, like maybe like Jimmy Carr, Frankie Boyle. They've made and said some horrific things over the years, but we know it's all just for laughs. We all know it's not just, you know, trying to get you to bit in with, you know, your political beliefs. It's all just about fun and games. And not just this, but also with the Monty Python series, there was like nudity in there that was meant to be seen as funny. And, you know, like, especially people like Jackass, so I'm just spitballing here with people, I think, where he's just running around naked and getting his dick out. It's just all this, like, boyish stuff that just, you know, is, you know, primarily there to make people laugh, like I said previously. And, you know, when it comes down to wokeism, they don't like any of this. Not only is it very subversive towards, like I said, white straight males, but also being able to put in feminism and other characters of colour into video games, and, movies, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but they're actually abusing DIE, which is diversity, inclusion and equity, in, for example, hiring people just based off their race, but having no white characters that, like, for example, they're race swapping, for example, in the new Mermaid movie that came out recently, and also with Captain Jack Sparrow, which are doing, and also I've heard even Silver Surfer is apparently going to be a woman, which is just completely insane and crazy. I don't even know how they're even getting away with this. I think even Disney are even being attempted to be sued by people, and also the anti-Christian stuff that they put in some of their films as well. And this isn't even to do with the, I guess, what they're doing now. Even back in the day, I think, for example, Walt Disney, he put stuff in his cartoons like racist stereotypes, and he also talked about, well, not talked, he didn't talk about, but he also did other things in his cartoons. And it was also interesting as well when it came down to Norman Finkelstein said about being, you know, this, you know, wokeism being the new fascism or something, where it was sort of, you know, I don't know, it's kind of complicated when to talk about fascism because it goes on about like the history of it and sort of to do with being able to have a one-party state. So this is kind of like the imperialism aspect, and this is kind of complicated for me to talk about, but I do think Norman Finkelstein is right of it being able to take over with like a part of a Marxist ideology and pretty much just tearing it, and then pretty much anyone who is around it is called racist, and it is just this one central part that people can't escape on. You know, it's this ideology that is in movies and, you know, movies and games. And that is that centre mass of being able to just stay that with that one part, and then if you criticise it anyway, like I said before, you are racist. And I think that is kind of the aspect of what Norman Finkelstein was trying to say in one of his latest interviews. Like I mentioned with its history, not just with Disney, but also to do with how it was worked. Like, for example, there was the whole 1960s when it come down to the civil rights movement with Martin Luther King, and there was some sort of weird work stuff with, like, for example, I think it was to do with like white families and promoting them, and it was sort of like this kind of culture war between black and white communities. I did a lot of research on the civil rights movement and the NAACP, the National Advancement and Colour of People, I think, if I can remember that right, and this was to do with like it being work with like, you know, miscegenation and all these other aspects, but I'm not going to cover that too much because I think that was just an aspect there of the 60s. I might do a separate video of that because there's a lot to talk about there, but that is also another aspect of it as well. There is go work, go broke. You might have heard this phrase before, and I think this is to do with, you know, Disney pushing all of this, pretty much what it would be all considered woke propaganda. And because it would be considered work, I do think that, you know, eventually they are pushing all of this agenda, but eventually they're going to hit a wall where people are realising this isn't really made for this is made for... I haven't got even a clue what this is even made for. What is this even made for? Is it made for people who have dyed hair and a little bit chubby? Is it made for people who wear leather fetish? I have no idea who it would be made for, but Disney originally was about family films. It was about people looking at, you know, like family values, you know, like maybe the nuclear family, or, you know, some type of family theme in there. You know, that's why when people go to Disney World, they go because they go with their family, and it makes it feel special. But when they do all of this with their movies, the remakes, the race swap, people are going to see through that, and they're not going to see it's really for them. And, you know, that is the whole marketing, especially to do with them also making a streaming platform, which doesn't make even sense. It is trendy, but because they're losing that much money, I think it's just, and another thing I did want to mention, I think it's just a religion for these people. Yeah, the religion comes first, and the second is the money, which they're not really going to get any more of, especially because it's very hatred based against a specific group of people that I just mentioned. And what do I think of it? Well, I think it is kind of weird. It has a lot of history, and it has a lot of aspect of what groups it affects, and over time how it's been slowly changed and kind of morphed into what it is now. I kind of do want to make some follow-up videos because there is, like I said, a lot to talk about, and obviously, yeah, I don't know, it's very complicated for me to even talk about, but I think that it is kind of really towards hatred against white people, and it's more pro-black, you know, anti-white narrative, and the kind of the anti-white agenda being pushed into a lot of their media, like I said. So anyway, hopefully if you enjoyed this video about me talking about wokeism, what it is, the comedians that have, you know, suffered from having their content being taken down in the past, and also the aspect of it might be, you know, something similar to like fascism, as what Norman Finkelstein said. And also the anti-white stuff in there is, you know, I don't agree on that. I do think that is just an abuse of DIE, which I think Disney are now being sued for. And as well, if you want to click on these videos where also I've talked about other aspects of commentary, and also talk about other aspects of also even streamers, if you want to click on those videos to talk about them a little bit more in detail. And before you click on this video, I actually have a link tree when I've myself improved them, and also my ADHD channels where I talk about those a little bit more in detail as well.